So Jaclyn Goldgrub joins us today. She is the founder and owner of Dear Dreamer, a smartly curated boutique that provides a fun, thoughtful, and welcoming shopping experience in Brooklyn, New York. Before opening her first retail store in 2023, Jaclyn was a VP/DMM at Ross Stores and spent most of her career in the junior apparel division. She started her buying career at Macy's, where she completed the executive training program after graduating from Emory University's Gozieta Business School in 2007. I don't think I said that right. Jaclyn grew up in Long Island and has always been passionate about fashion. When she's not helping shoppers hone their style, she can be found running around Brooklyn with her two children, Layla, age 8, and Hunter, age 5. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for having me. You guys can see on the screen her adorable website, which is reminiscent of her store. Kind of a cute little watercolor of that. Who did that for you?
No, actually, it was a local mom in the neighborhood, another store that was pretty close to my shop. She had posted an illustration of her store on Instagram, and I saw it, so I asked her who had done it for her, and yeah.
It's great. It's beautiful. Well, I wonder if you could start by telling us about your career path before.
Sure.
Dear Dreamer.
So I graduated in 2007 from Emory. I graduated out of the business school.
How do you pronounce it?
Goldgrub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
I really wasn't sure exactly what path I wanted to take. Initially, I thought it would be finance, but after a brief stint at Morgan Stanley, I realized that I had absolutely no idea what finance was really about. I couldn't really understand investments. I needed something that I could actually touch and feel and understand. And I've always been interested in fashion, but never understood what a career in fashion could look like. So Macy's actually did a recruitment fair at Emory, and they have a training program there for when you first get out of college, which sounds really interesting to me because it was a nice transition. It's a big corporate company, but they really treat the executive training program separately. So it almost feels like you're back in a college style class, yet you're getting real hands-on experience. And what I really liked about it is I've always been very interested in math and analytics, but I also like the creative aspects of fashion. And this sounded like an opportunity to sort of combine the two together. So that's where I started to learn about buying, because at Emory, we didn't have any sort of fashion merchandising programs or anything like that. And I ended up applying, I got the job, and do you want me to go into the details about that?
Yeah.
So the way that the program starts out, which I actually think is a pretty incredible part of the experience, they make you work the floor of Macy's for 4 weeks, which I think when most people go into buying, the most important thing is understanding your customer. Cannot stress that enough, more so than anything else. And I think a lot of people today go in and think, we're going to be going to fashion shows and buy pretty things, and you really have to know who your audience is. So by working on the floor, I really got to understand, and it was only for 4 weeks, but I really got to see who is this customer that shops at Macy's? What are they looking for? What do they value? Really starting at the ground up. So I was in the swimwear department during July, which was crazy. Saw some interesting things happen, and then I ended up in the dress department as an assistant buyer, actually a trainee and not an assistant buyer. And I was in social dresses. And what that means is we were buying mother of the bride dresses and just other things that you might wear to a wedding or some sort of occasion. And then I stayed in the dress world for 2 years. And then I moved to junior streetwear, which was very fun, but it was a very downtrending business. So bought brands like, a lot of them don't exist anymore, Coogee, Zarion, Rockaware, Apple Bottoms, Sean John, which was the ultimate back in the 90s, which I guess is kind of, again, right now. But it was a really bad business, 100% markdown rate. So it was a tough environment to be in.
Yeah. Right around, right?
So this was right after 2008. I was there during the consolidation. There were 4 offices of Macy's, and Macy's North, South, Central, and West, to be consolidated after the crash, and it was just Macy's East. And that was an experience too, because so many people got laid off. And all of a sudden, I had to combine reporting from 4 different offices, and I was just an assistant buyer at the time, so kind of knew what was going on, but not really. That was crazy. And we like moved into system, like inventory and stuff, and learning how to buy for the whole, country and stuff like that. So
Yeah, that's crazy to think how many more iterations of shuffles that Macy's has gone through since then, too.
yeah,
Which is crazy. How long were you at Macy's more total?
so I was there for 3 years. I was actually in the process, I was getting promoted. So you start as an AD1, then you move to an AD2, and then you move to an associate buyer. Highly coveted position, because then the next thing is buyer. So I was actually in the process of interviewing to become an associate buyer in boys. I was going to be buying, I think, boys 8 to 20, like Tommy Hilfiger. I think they had like 1 buyer for that or something. That was how the associate buying position was. I was kind of weary about it because I didn't know anything about kids' clothes, and it was very specific. But I thought it was a good opportunity, and I always wanted to be an associate buyer because I ultimately wanted to be a buyer. At the same time, Ross, I started hearing a lot of people going to this place called Ross. I don't know in this room, have you all heard, who raised your hand if you know what Ross Dress for Less is? Okay. So there's none in New York, and I grew up in New York. So they're mainly all in California, Texas, and Florida. So I'd always heard of, I thought it was actually Ross Athletics, like a clothing brand. I didn't know what it was. At the time, I think there were like 700 stores at the time. Macy's had like 800 maybe by that point. So it was pretty big. And I kept hearing really good things, like people are going there and people are really liking the experience and learning so much. So I actually was not on Facebook, even though Facebook, my school was actually one of the first schools on it. And I'd never been on any sort of social media. And my old roommate got a job at Saks, and I'd asked her, how did you get this job? She's like, oh, there's this thing called LinkedIn. At that point, like we didn't even know what that was. So I was like, oh, maybe I should get on that, because that I could like go with it for getting a job. So I got onto LinkedIn, and within like 1 week, the recruiters were, and still to this day, use LinkedIn. A recruiter had reached out to me, spoke to her, liked what I heard. So even though I was about to move into my new role, I remember it was beginning of June, this was happening in May, I got an interview at Ross. I was like, let me see what this place is about. Interviewed like with HR, and I heard it was like a 6-month interview time period, which sounds like crazy because it's like a CIA type experience. And so I ended up interviewing with who would become my boss for the next like 11 years. And then I interviewed with her boss, and he was the one that actually really sold me, because I felt really bad leaving Macy's. I was like, I'm getting this huge promotion to an associate buyer. They've invested so much in me. How could I leave? And when I spoke to him during the interview, he was just so enamored. Like, he was just the most outrageous guy in the whole world. And unfortunately, he's passed away a couple of years ago. But he just like was very honest. And he's like, do you want to learn? Do you want to be the best merchant you could possibly be? And all the things he was asking me, like, it was just such a great conversation. I was like, this is, I think, where I need to be, because I'm actually gonna feel like I'm learning the most I possibly can. And ultimately, yeah, I ended up taking a demotion. I went back to being an AD2. And it was probably, that was the best decision I had made from a career perspective at that point.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think that? Again, just because you feel like he was so great to work under?
I think too, someone once said this to me about, so Macy's, I think the training is really great. I think a lot of the sentiment there, I don't think is wonderful. I think a lot of people, have had good experience, bad experience, that's like anywhere. that it's not a growing company. It's a company that's been downsizing, doing massive layoffs. They have a lot of issues. And when you're working at a company like that, it's really hard, A, for your own personal growth. And it's just hard to see like the light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing. And Ross was really growing like exponentially. I think now they're going to have almost 2,500 stores. And at the time, like it was in that stage where they weren't that big yet. So it still was kind of functioning like a very small owned company and not this big corporation, which it ultimately evolved into more so. But I just think the merchants there at the time, and this is back in 2010, they were talented, you know, in many different ways, but they were excellent teachers. And it was an amazing hands-on experience, like to learn everything there possibly is about buying.
Yeah, yeah. And so then you started in which division?
So I started in juniors because I guess they had taken into consideration I was in junior streetwear. I was 82. It was junior knit tops, so it's very niche, like very specific. But it actually was the biggest business in all of juniors because I don't know if you realize how many knit tops that you probably have in your closet, but it's way more than a woven or a sweater or jacket or anything like that. And my buyer at the time was super young. She'd only been buying for like a year or two, I think. And my boss at the time, she had been at the company. She had sort of she started in Macy's too, but had been at Ross already for like 10 plus years. And she was pretty young. She was like in her mid 30s already at like she was a DMM at the time. And so I saw like the growth opportunity there. And I think a lot of this is luck, like in terms of like getting the promotion and stuff like that. It's timing is everything. Not necessarily luck, timing, I should say. So I ended up, my boss at the time ended up moving to Miami because most people at that time did not leave Ross. Like there were people there 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, like people stayed. So in that sense, the fact that she had moved kind of helped me along the path. But ultimately I ended up becoming the buyer in that area.
Can you explain what juniors is, just in case
Yeah.
there's anyone who doesn't understand?
So it's funny because like you think about it, you know, as like young tween girls, but actually our target market was a lot of grandmothers, you know, in their 70s would shop the junior rack. But traditionally, juniors is like ages 16 to 26, 28 years old. It's a weird name for it because it kind of makes you sound like you're like a teeny bopper, and it's not really for that. And I think the junior like juniors itself has evolved, but essentially young women coming into the workforce, still in high school, some in college, some out of school, that it's, you know, even people in their 30s, 40s, and like I said, grandmothers would shop the rack.
Yeah. So usually a little bit more young aesthetic, or, you know, kind of like contemporary, but also cheaper. Yeah, you know, but kept in mind that people are maybe a little bit more price conscious because they're at the beginning of their shopping career.
Exactly, very trend driven. Like that is like the ultimate thing. Like we were always trying to emulate Forever 21. Like at the time, Forever 21 was the end all be all. And there's a lot of things that have, you know, happened since 2010 till now, which I think now even Ross Juniors is very different than it was back then. But we were always trying to be not I remember Tony was his name, the guy that interviewed me. That was my GMM at the time. He's like, we don't want to be the first ones to the party, but we need to be a close second. So we don't want to be the first ones on the train because it's not mass yet, but you definitely don't want to be too behind because then you're going to miss it. So that's essentially, yeah, juniors.
Yeah, great. So that, and then what happened? So you're now the buyer of juniors.
So I was the buyer of juniors, kind of like, you know, kind of very overwhelming experience. And I didn't have an assistant for a really long time, which actually was a blessing because trying to train someone and do your job is really hard. It's two completely different jobs. So I was doing everything from buying the garments, fitting the garments, trending out, you know, forecasting, analyzing, selling, doing reorders, working with vendors, working with management, doing strategy. You're doing everything as a buyer. It's an intense role. It's super rewarding. It's super challenging. It's super competitive. But it's pretty amazing, like on a Monday to walk in the office and go through a selling report and be like, oh my God, I just sold like 1,000 units of this top. Like, I can't believe 1,000 girls are walking around in this top. So it's pretty, it's an incredible experience, but there's a lot that goes into buying, which I'm sure you guys have learned whether in this class or, you know, other classes that you've taken. I can go into more of that after. But after I was the buyer there, went through a bunch of different assistants, which managing is totally different expertise, and that can also be super rewarding yet challenging as well. And then ultimately, I probably was the buyer for a couple of years. I don't remember exactly, it was 5 years. And then I got promoted to DMM, so that's a divisional merchandise manager. And at that point, Ross, when you were a DMM, you bought an area and you managed another buyer. So at the time, they didn't like, I think we didn't have another buyer at the time. So I was buying both areas. And then ultimately my whole team, I went on maternity leave, I think this happened. And then my whole team changed. They hired 2 buyers for me when I was on maternity leave, which that was an experience because I didn't get to choose these people. They just were given to me and had no idea if we would get along or not. So that happened back in 2019, I think it was. And fast forward, we entered COVID. So, which was very crazy. So I had 2 girls reporting to me, one older, one younger, go through COVID with them. And then ultimately we get back around, I think it was 2021. I ended up actually getting moved to the plus size department, so totally different world. I got promoted to be a VP. I went through that. I think I was there 6 months. And at that point, I was managing 2 buyers, the tops and bottoms buyer, much smaller volume, like super, super tiny. Like I was doing maybe 40 million. I don't remember exactly the numbers in sales in that job. And let's say this was like really small, really niche. Yeah. But very SKU intensive, really difficult business, really interesting business, actually a lot of opportunity, but really hard, really challenging. And fast forward, there were a lot of things playing in my mind. I'd been there for 12 years and I was like, you know what, like 2 young kids, always been my dream to open up a store of my own since I was little and just didn't think it was possible. And I kind of said to my husband, I'm like, I think it's now or never. I can always go back. Like, you know, I was in corporate America, can always go back, but I'm never going to be able to just like switch out of it the more I stay. And it was a random day in May, and I just had a day, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. Like for me, for my family, all these things. And I ended up, it was June of 2023. I left Ross, which was, you know, a very difficult decision. I took like a minute.
2022.
2022. Oh yeah, 2022. That makes sense. Yeah, 2022. June 22. I took like a month to just like be, and then I started getting restless and trying to figure out what the next move was. Then I started putting together my thoughts about what this store could be, a million iterations of the name, the location, and then ultimately signed my lease in November of 22 and opened up in February of 23.
And so you're a year in, and
Yes.
going well.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not easy, but it definitely is all it's cracked up to be. I will say that, and I have no regrets at opening, but I will say Ross was the best education I could have had. I always tell those people I would never have been successful doing this had I not had that experience. It's almost like conditioning for the Olympics, like in a way, you know, like you need all this practice. You need to screw up a lot. You need to make a lot of mistakes, and you really need to be in it at all these different levels in order to be successful. And I think being really self-critical and humble, those are things I learned from Ross.
Yeah.
And being able to analyze the business, like when things aren't working, what do you do? How to work with vendors, how to figure out what to buy, how to buy, how much to buy, all those things, like, it doesn't just come naturally, like you have to learn how to do that type of thing.
Yeah, and negotiate. I feel like at Ross, you're really trained in negotiation.
Yeah.
At least from my side of the table, I always felt that. So
Yeah. That's probably right. One of the biggest things. I don't really get to negotiate much now. I pay like top dollar for everything, but in its own way, there's a lot of other things to talk through with vendors. I just had a meeting today with someone that I've been having some issues with them. But it's like, right, I always say you can take the girl out of Ross, but you can't take the Ross out of the girl. Like,
yeah,
it travels with you.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. So how did you actually get it started? So you're saying you had a lease, and obviously, I don't know if you developed your concept by yourself or if you hired someone to help you with that, because I feel like you have a very strong brand aesthetic for a boutique.
So initially when I was just thinking, a lot of it was like going to a quiet place, and I took a journal with me, and someone told me to do this too, like some friends, and talking to people, like in general, like you just start like talking about the concept, and people have all these ideas for you, but sitting with myself with like my thoughts on a piece of paper, I still have the notebook, I started writing out, what could make this store different from any other experience, and like what are the things I like in a store, what are the things I don't like, what are the things that are missing in this neighborhood, where do I want to open this store. At the end of the day, I leaned on my cousin a little bit because she's a graphic designer and she's super critical, and when I thought of the name Dear Dreamer, my husband's like, that's a really hard name to say. Like, I don't think it like goes. And I was like, well, what about Warby Parker? I'm like, it's like the weirdest name I ever heard. And it's like a household name at this point. Like, it's like a kid's name. It's not natural until you say it like 3 billion times,
That's true.
And I liked this idea. Initially, I would get stopped in the street a lot, like for not just because I was like dressed, outrageously, like maybe on stage, but just in general, like people would be like, where'd you get this jacket? Where'd you get this bag? Where'd you get those shoes? And I'd go into the whole story about it. And there's a lot of storytelling, I think, when it comes to fashion. And I really like this idea of like telling your story. And so initially I was like, oh, like maybe it's something like tell your story. And I'm like, that sounds like a bookstore. It doesn't sound like a clothing store. And that's how I ended up coming up with this love letter to personal style. And it wasn't just me, it was another girl that I'll tell you about. But it's style with a story is like the tagline. So I liked this idea. I was looking actually for I think it was synonyms of the word dreamer, maybe, because I liked dreamer and I didn't know what to put with it. I was going to do neon dreamer, but then that sounded like a party in Bushwick, and I was like, it's not, I don't think that's it. But I like loud, fun, energetic stuff. And I was like, Dear, I guess, came up, and I'd been following this store in Chicago called Love Charlie. And I liked this idea that it was like part of this bigger story. So I was like, I think I'm going to go with Dear Dreamer. And I called my cousin. I was like, this is the idea I have. Like, what do you think? And she's been like, absolutely hate it. She's like, no, I love it. And she's a marketing person. So she was like, I think there's so much you can do with it. Like, you're speaking to your audience. And she definitely got with it. So she actually is the one, she's like, okay, you need to form the LLC. You need to look up like the trademark copyright stuff to make sure no one owns Dear Dreamer. You need to buy the URL like through GoDaddy and protect the website, even though I didn't really have a functioning website at the time. Because she's like, in the future, you're going to want that. You don't have to buy it from someone. Way cheaper to just do it now. So those were like the initial like housekeeping steps of it, and it didn't all happen at once. And so right, I formed the LLC, I bought the website, I looked up to make sure no one had owned the name. Yes, at that point, I don't know if I had the Instagram handle yet, because I don't know if I thought, well, maybe it did, Shop, because there was no Dear Dreamer, that's already taken, so Shop Dear Dreamer. And my husband went to camp in Canada, and he was like scrolling through his Instagram, and this girl was sort of advertising herself, that she was just getting started. She had done a lot of work in editorial at Teen Vogue, and she writes a little bit, I think, for InStyle magazine, The Cut, like all these different places, and she was just getting started on her own, sort of like me. He's like, I really think you two should connect. And it was honestly like a blessing that he like saw that, because we ended up having this like first meeting, and she's the total opposite of me, like quiet, reserved. She says a lot fewer words. I say a lot of words. I talk really fast. She talks really slow. And
It's black and white.
only black and white. Yes. So
I was just a guess.
yeah, and you know, it's like we kind of needed the yin and the yang, and she really helped me develop like the strategy behind the brand. And we went through like a whole hours and hours of meetings to like figure out who is their dreamer, who is the customer we're servicing, what is our mission statement, how are we gonna, what is this gonna look like from a social media perspective, and what do you want to like show to the world of who this brand is going to be. So really the branding strategy came like together. The two of us worked on that, and still to this day I work with her weekly, monthly, more for like social media, but like even when we were developing the website and stuff like that, any ideas I have about pop-ups and stuff like that at the store, or things I want to do. Even like today, I was telling her I was coming here. We didn't even discuss it yet, but like I always meet a person, and I have no partner in what I'm doing, which is a whole other thing that people don't talk to you about. Like it's very lonely sometimes. You know, I talk to my friends, I talk to my family, but like you need that like person to like lean on. My husband, you know, he can only give me so much advice, and I don't always hear it all the time because he has his own business, but she's a really good sounding board for me, and she just comes with a very clear head. So I needed that, and it's almost like a therapist in a way for
Yeah,
your brands. Yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
That's awesome. So you're still working with her even?
Still working
Yeah,
with
2
her.
years
She's
later.
excellent. She does a lot of like the copywriting for me, because that's not my strong suit, writing. And I'll say it in 1,000 words and she'll say it in 20. So I'll come up with the concept, and we do a lot of letter writing. I have a typewriter on the front of the store, so we are rotating the letter all the time, and that's sort of follow us on social media. You'll see a lot of the posting I do. It starts with Dear Dreamer, and we write like a letter. So she'll help me a lot with that.
Yeah, awesome. So then you launched in February of 23, and
Which is like,
first year.
yeah, so the launch was like so exciting. Like having your friends and family come, and like seeing the store from the neighborhood is like mind blowing. Like seeing these random people like walk around with their shopping bags, like it's very like fulfilling and rewarding, and seeing the smile on someone's face of like a new mom that has nothing to wear and she feels like crap, and you know she hasn't slept in 2 weeks, and or seeing this young girl, she's going on an interview to try and get a job, or you know she has graduation, or you know a wedding. It's so exciting to find something where someone's just so happy, and then they come back and like, I love what I bought, I got 1,000 compliments on it. You know, that's like the best part of the experience. I do a lot of pop-ups with like a lot of like really small brands that are local. I'm very supportive, especially like women-owned businesses in the neighborhood. I love like finding new ideas. Like any of the girls that have ever worked for me, I'm always encouraging them to come to me with ideas. One of the girls, she's a musician. She does this like a side hustle. She would do like live music at the store. We've done jewelry pop-ups. I do girls' night out. I posted like my friend started making these quilted jackets. I posted her one time. Like it's just like so. It's really fun and really inspiring to see all these other new, you know, businesses start, and to be able to give them like a platform. I mean, it's a tiny store, it's 300 square feet, but it like works. I don't know how, but yeah, we somehow make it work.
It's great. It's awesome. You're taking experiential retail to the boutique, which is what people are looking for when they're going to shop. If they're going to go out of their house, they want it to be fun.
Yeah, and I think the experience part of it is so important. Like, how do you engage the customer? How do you keep them coming back? So I'm very big on like I rotate the floor like daily. Like when things aren't selling, I move them around. I buy constantly. I don't buy too much of anything. I try and buy as little as possible to offer like the most breadth of assortment. And you know, react to trends like those are trending. I found, you know, through my wholesale website, you know, who I could buy bows from. And then like, you know, oh wow, they sold in like 1 week. I'm like, what else could I do with a bow? Make pearls, put vintage, like, you know, flowers on it, whatever. So, you know, how does that translate into now I have t-shirts with both? You know, it's just like it's taking the one little thing and making it a bigger idea. Sometimes customers have great ideas for me too. So yeah, that's been
I find seeing easy. I'm actually had a bow exhibit this semester.
yeah.
I was short. Going back to my questions a bit, and going way back before everything is, do you feel like there's anything that you learned in college, you wish you learned more of in college before?
I always say like I wish colleges offered like welcome to the real world 101, like how to open a checking account, how to know how much you could afford in rent, how to know how much you can spend on your credit card without, you know, going into debt. Basic life skills, I guess I would call them, which I think most people just think they're like innate, but thank God I had parents to guide me to ask these questions too. Like, how do you know what to look for in a lease of an apartment? Like, just those types of things. I wish there was a class for that. I've actually heard Emory started doing certain things like that. I don't know if it's in the regular college or in the business school. Or even just like resume writing, cover letters, interview skills, like stuff like that, because even coming from a business school, I don't know that I got a lot of that through the school. I think I did a lot of that through asking friends and mentors and stuff like that to help me. But I think that the resume is the first thing the person sees, you know? So it is actually important, and it's important what you include, how you do it, you know, whether I've seen resumes that are like 2 pages long, like no one's reading past the page, you know? So it's like, there's just certain things that I think, I wish that I had that piece. From a buying perspective, I mean, I knew nothing going into it, and I think that's okay. You know, I think that if you go to the right company, they want to be able to mentor, train, and develop you. Would it have been nice? Of course. Like I wish, like probably I would have loved going into a school like FIT because it would have honed in on all those things that I like so much. But I think you can learn some of those things on the job type of thing. And I think like the basic life skills.
I wonder if you can tell us in your own words what the role of the buyer really is. And you know, I often ask my guests what a typical week looks like, which I know isn't really a thing.
Yeah.
But going back, you know, to Ross and Macy's days, like what your week would kind of look like as a general flow.
So I would say like buying at Macy's and buying at Ross were two completely different things. Buying at Macy's was more like I say being a glorified marketing manager, because a lot of what you were doing was like dictated by the brands. You didn't have like a lot of choice. You were more managing like promotions, like from like a discount perspective, like what promotion, like, you know, this Macy's is on sale all the time. There's so much thought behind that. And the advertising calendar, there's a lot that I don't know a lot about that stuff, but there's a lot of focus on that. Buying at Ross was like the wild, wild west when I first got there. But it's really, it's an analytical business, like number one. You have to have an eye for sure, depending on your business though, because a lot of it could be like widgets at the end of the day. But if you're in a fashion trend business, you have to understand trends and how trends change and how trends evolve and the life cycle of a trend. And knowing, like, people ask me right now, how do you buy? What do you know what the next big thing is? Honestly, social media can be like the worst thing in the whole world, but it also has opened the doors for so many things too, because you can see so much at once. Like I didn't have that. Like, I mean, there was like magazines you had to look at. Maybe we had the internet, but like there was nothing like what it is today. That you can see the trends so much faster, and that's why I think things are evolving so much quicker too. But So it's analytical, it's trend, it's having an eye for product, being able, the relationships are everything. Everything. Like when you are stuck and you have hundreds of thousands of units on order with a vendor and you can't pick up the phone and have an honest conversation with them, like you're kind of screwed. And like that's like the biggest thing at Ross was how to cultivate those relationships and how to build trust. Because there's a lot, like people screw up buying a lot. People buy a lot of the wrong things and you have to figure out like how to get through it. And I think that like obstacle course of like where to go when things go wrong is what Ross conditions you, like how to fix it. So whether it's, do I cancel? Do I test it first, see how it performs, and then buy it back? Do I buy it at a discount? Do I put it at a different price? Was it not produced yet? Can we use the fabric for something else? Like there's so many things you have to go through. Knowing how much to negotiate, that type of stuff. So negotiations is huge. And then mentor training and development as a buyer, because you're never really just buying yourself. Like you have a whole team surrounded, by you. So that's another whole aspect of buying. Probably and dealing with upper level management, like knowing how to talk, upward and talk downward.
Yeah.
How to really self-advocate, which I don't think I was very good at. A lot of times very intimidating, talking to these senior level people, but I will tell you a lot of them don't even know what they're talking about. They just can talk the talk really well, and that's a lot of it. It's kind of fake it till you make it a little bit. There's an essence of that.
Yeah.
Because they will make you feel they've been down this path, they know all, but they don't. There actually is so much that they can learn from you guys because you are the future and you see things differently. And a lot of things are so set in stone the way they've been for years and years, and it needs to evolve. And I think it's slowly evolving, but it's hard to change, the mindset of someone that's been doing it for 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah.
And they're set in their ways.
Totally. Totally makes sense. How far out would you typically buy at Ross?
So we always, we were buying for tomorrow, for a week from now, a month from now, 6 months from now. I probably never bought one in 6 months.
Yeah.
Now I'm buying holiday. But then I'm also buying stuff to ship next week. I'm still having that Ross mentality, but the furthest out I buy is holiday.
Yeah.
Like today, I think I just bought August, September, maybe October.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know only a few people raised hands knowing who Ross was, but I don't know how many of you had shop at off-price places like TJ Maxx, Marshalls, Burlington, all big competitors of Ross. It's interesting to find out, I found as a buyer, being in the industry, is that off-pricers actually do place upfront orders. Some upfront orders. I don't know what percentage of your business.
I think it depends how fashion driven you are. For juniors, it is a very high percentage. Because if you didn't buy it up front, then you didn't have it. And with the time, 1,500 stores, if you calculate it 6 weeks in the store, it's a lot of units to buy an item. So we used to buy it started going up actually when I was leaving. It was we would buy 12,000 unit SKUs, one jean in one wash, across multiple sizes.
Yeah.
But even of a white t-shirt, I could buy 12,000 units of one SKU. So you have to buy that up front because
Yeah.
it's carrying no stock.
Yeah. Interestingly, as a wholesaler, the margin that we would sell something to Ross would actually end up being somewhat similar to the margin we sold it to Macy's. But because Macy's has all those markdowns that she was just talking about, where they're marking stuff down all the time, we would end up having to give Macy's money back at the end of the season to pay for their markdowns versus what Ross pays you, that's the end of it. There's no negotiating later on down the road.
And that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Because collecting, can you imagine going through a season with a vendor and you pay them millions of dollars for the merchandise, and then all of a sudden you're okay, by the way, it's December 23rd, you're about to go for Christmas, you owe us $1 million. That's the phone call you had to make. And it's really challenging, and that's why they work it into their pricing structure, because who could afford that, And so they say with Ross, your first negotiations, your best and your last, but there's also things that happen, when things aren't selling and stuff like that, but nothing like that. Nothing at the end of the or you owe this amount of money. And I actually heard Macy's doesn't have margin agreements anymore, or they were phasing out of it or
Oh,
something.
wow.
Yeah, because I think a lot of vendors push back to say,
We can't do this.
we
anymore.
can't afford it, we won't be in business anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, when you walk into an off-price store, you might find a whole rack of something and put it up front. Do you have any advice for anyone who is looking to go into a corporate job like that or to try to get one of those jobs?
I guess like the biggest thing is, you know, you have to go in with a very open mind, a great attitude, and like not, you know, ready to really like start at the bottom. And I think it's hard when you're first getting out of school, you want to like climb up the corporate ladder so fast. But it's like you need that time down there to learn everything. Because once you start moving up, like there's not as much time to learn and you're expected to just know it. So it's like better, like in a way, because that's when you start making all the mistakes and you start creating sort of your web of people, you know, your mentors, your role models, your peers. That's a really important time. And, you know, as much as we've moved away from working in person, there's no replacement for having that buddy sitting across from you and being able to lean over and ask a question. Like, you can't just like it's so different. Like, they can show it to you, like physically sit next to your computer. And I know you can do this, you know, remotely, but there's no replacement for the human interaction. And I think for, you know, for honestly, for you guys, that's hard, like to go to these jobs that are like fully remote, like for you guys to learn. And I used to just sit in my boss's office and listen to her on the phone for hours and negotiate. And I learned more from like that experience than ever like typing through an Excel spreadsheet. And there's no replacement for that. Like, even you conference in a phone call, it's different. I see her mannerisms, I see her expressions, like she starts mouthing things to me through the phone while, you know, she's talking to another person. But there's just no replacement for it.
Yeah.
So I still think the working, you know, in person for that job, for buying, for sure.
Yeah.
And touch and feel a product. I mean, how do you fit a garment if you can't like put it on your body? You know, we used to fit our own stuff. I did myself. Now there's a fit team and all this stuff, but like, I mean, I got killed this past year even through Dear Dreamer, like buying stuff off CAD, you know, like not seeing it in person and then come to the store and like, what is this? No.
Yeah.
And not everyone's gonna like be like, oh yeah, sure, we'll take it back, you know, like no problem.
Right.
You know? Oh, you said a typical week, right?
Yeah, typical week. Yeah. So how, like, you coming in on Monday, what's it look like?
So Monday is like very report driven. So like you come in on Monday, we go through what we call the item sales report. It's like this 400-page document. It's like crazy. It's cool. And like sticky everything, one side for best, one side for worst seller, highlighting, making like my notes, what worked, what didn't work. You know, you go through so many iterations, you know, whether it's on a style basis, a vendor basis, a color basis, silhouette. We used to look at what's called motif, you know, whether it's printed, solid, well, what prints are working. You know, if you're in denim, what inseams are working, you know. That's how you know when we moved away from skinny, no one was like, this can never happen. We're like, yeah, but the skinny selling is terrible right now. You know, it's all wide button. And then it's like, okay, is this barrel jean thing? I asked my friend or boss, I'm like, they haven't been able to find someone to actually execute this correctly. But it's like funny, it's like not a one size for everyone. So it's never going to be like the math thing. But it's just so interesting, like analyzing trends and seeing what's working and not working. But that's how you'd start. You kind of like review, we pull bestsellers, we physically pull them back in the day. Now you just like put it on an Excel spreadsheet, but we actually have the merchandise. We would go through sometimes the whole division and we'd go through bestseller, top, bottoms, everything, because you need to see the whole outfit to understand it. Like, because if you know the rise in jeans and you know what size, what length tops you need. And then we'd get on the phone with vendors, you know, to talk through reorders, get deliveries. If we have a problem, schedule appointments to go up to see them, look at new stuff. So yeah, it's really like analyzing, selling was Monday, all that. And then throughout the week, it was like vendor cleaning,
You're at a lot of
market,
markets across, yeah.
comp shopping, huge.
Yeah.
Like making sure to understand like we'd be in TJ's, Marshall's, or Burlington at least once a week. Because you couldn't get to a Ross as easy because they weren't in the city. And then you shop like, you shop higher end too, but like, the mid-tier guys, obviously Zara's like, in there once a week. Because we report back to each other. I mean, these assistant buyers would do like crazy trend recaps, like insane. Better than things like you would see, in the editorials and magazine, yeah. But so comp shopping was really huge. And yeah, just being with vendors or going to a Ross once a week. That was another thing.
Out in New Jersey.
Yeah. And we'd go and we'd like go through the rack and analyze best sellers, worst sellers. We'd like square root and inside out and backward.
Yeah. How do buyers make decisions for what brands to buy, both at Ross and at,
Well, at Ross, like you have the luxury of kind of like, you don't have to buy from certain vendors. You could drop a vendor if they're not great. That's only if you're like in non-branded world, like in juniors, we were never branded. So everything was kind of like a no name. It wasn't our private label, just wasn't like it wasn't like an Adidas or a Nike. Like those are relationships where like, you have to buy certain of those brands or they won't sell you anymore. But we had the luxury of buying whatever we wanted. In terms of who you buy from, well, all goes back to content, who has the best looking line, that's the best body for the best price. And, not making a decision in a showroom is actually harder than making a decision because sometimes you need to like go home, really like take a deep breath, look at everything, because you might go to, a couple different vendors that week and they all might be carrying the same thing, and then you make the wrong decision if you give the order to the first one because maybe the second guy has a better price. So it's actually really important to like take a step back and not be too quick, which I think that was probably something I could have done better, pretty quick. And even now, I said, I go to the shows now. I go to Coterie and Magic because I did that at Ross, and that's how I found most of the brands that I started with. And I don't even get orders there. I go back, I put it on a PowerPoint. It's called like a style out. I style everything out. I look at my price points. What am I missing? What do I have too much of? Like one year, I don't know. I had like, or even this year, I had like 700 things of crochet. I'm like, okay, Jaclyn, you can't have like 900 crochet chains in the store. Like you only have X amount of space, X amount of hangers. You have to see it sometimes because when you're just like buying, it's like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would say Tony always says it's all about content. At the end of the day, that's all that matters. If you don't have the right stuff, then who cares about all the rest, right?
Yeah. How did you find vendors for your?
So I started at the shows even before I opened. I went, I took notes.
What shows did you think was best?
So I would go to Coterie and Magic. So Magic is more like moderate price point and more junior driven. Coterie is going to be more like contemporary, higher price point. But the cool thing about Coterie is they have a lot of international brands, which I have found to be like the most exciting because they don't have a huge presence here in the US. So like even the brands I'm wearing today, everything is designed out of Tel Aviv. I have 2 brands from Paris. I have two designers from London. Like just a lot. I had a bunch from Mexico City when I first started. So there's just like so much interesting, like the fabrics they use, like printing technique, like all this type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then honestly, I would comp shop even like through just going to different boutiques' websites that I thought looked interesting. And a lot of these websites list every single designer that they have, where I just go through all the pictures. And I would be like, oh, I never heard of that brand. And I'd start doing research and I'd reach out to them and someone responds, someone.
Yeah.
There's a couple of small shows in the city that I went to. There's a lot of multi-line showrooms. So you go to one showroom and then you're like, oh, wow, no wonder in the store, all these stores carry these 3 brands. It's because they're all the same showroom.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that at first.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I have there's a bunch of wholesale websites too that you can go through. I buy a lot of my like gifts and accessories. Like I have greeting cards, I have matches, candles, stickers, keychains. I buy a lot of that in my wholesale.
That actually one of the students put an extra credit this week. The question was, how different is it to select a bunch of brick and mortar versus e-commerce?
So I'm still learning e-com. I never had a background in e-com. I knew absolutely nothing about it, so I was very scared to launch a website. So I just launched in February, and it has been slow. Like, you have to put so much money behind marketing because of the algorithms that are out there, and you're competing against big brands. And my accountant said to me when I launched it, he's like, the number one thing I'm going to tell you right now is you got to watch your marketing, like how much you're spending, because a lot of small businesses put so much money behind it and get no return. E-com, a lot of it is, listen, everyone's going to comp shop, right? You're going to go on one website and look to see where you can find it cheaper. So that's hard, you know, because sometimes you get websites that just undercut everyone. I try and put like my more expensive stuff online. I keep all the less expensive in the store. I don't even put it online because I move through it fast, and it gives people another reason to come to the store. I also have obviously the more expensive stuff sells slower. So I'm like, okay, if I can get someone to buy that online, that's another outlet. But I think the image of what you put on the website matters a lot. You know, does it look flattering on this person? You know, I take all the images from the brand. I don't photograph anything myself, it's too expensive. But, you know, so the imagery, the price point, I was interested to see like what would sell, you know, e-com versus brick and mortar. I mean, I'm doing like 1% sales online. You know what I mean? Like it's still so new.
Yeah.
I haven't found like what's been like the trend there. I don't have enough.
And Ross didn't really shop for e-commerce.
There is no e-commerce.
Yeah, there's
So I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah. And Macy's was like an attorney ecosystem.
And I wasn't part, they have a totally separate team.
Yes.
Now it's omni-channel, so it might be different, but when I was there, totally separate teams. But online, you know, I try and sell through Instagram. The only time I ever did well on Instagram was when I had like I do sale like twice a year. So in January, I would like post, and then I would post the prices, which I don't normally do. And that's when I moved through a lot of stuff. Like I was like, okay, this is now with 150, you know, like that.
Yeah.
And that I did, you know, I got like 10 sales in a day, and that was a big deal.
Yeah. People actually like DM you to buy, or they went through your website?
No, I didn't have the website.
Oh yeah.
But with DM me. Yeah. And it's funny, like on Instagram, when I attach the link, I noticed like people like to DM you, and if you attach a link sometimes, if you do it through their platform, you can't message a brand. So that's an interesting thing where I noticed I was getting more interaction when I wasn't posting the link because people would DM me. I think they feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
They're not gonna they're not gonna side, you know,
Yeah.
they want to reply to the message.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm like not in with the lingo, and I probably sound like.
Sounds good to me. What's the biggest trend that you're noticing? I mean, you just mentioned bows. I don't know if that's it.
I think it goes back to like the whole feminine look of like, you know, like the cherries and, you know, a lot of like handcrafted stuff. Like people love when things look like they're very handmade, embroideries. Trend wise, like just from an item perspective, sets have done very well for me, but I sell them separately. So sometimes I don't sell it together. I think Brooklyn also is like, has its own aesthetic, but I would say, yeah, like sets have been done well, crochet is doing well. I have all those like illusion socks from like Sock Hansies. Those are like amazing. People want something like a little different, but like they could kind of stand out. And that was another thing I learned, like, because the store's hot pink on the outside, a lot of people wouldn't normally wear pink, but when I put it in the store and then I put it on, they're like, oh wow, like I feel really good in this. Like color, like I get people that are like, I have not shopped since COVID. They're like, I want something fresh and new that's not gonna like break the bank in the store. And I think the pop of color, the really interesting print, I have a lot of like wacky prints and stuff, but like sometimes I have like roosters on a shirt right now. Like, yeah, people like it, you know, it's
Yeah.
just like something fun and different.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe you've already mentioned him, but or her, but who is the best boss that you've ever worked for and why?
Yeah, so definitely Tony. I mean, he's like one of those like last of the Mohegans. I don't think they make many like him anymore, unfortunately. But he's just like
Was this funny?
Tony DLC.
Okay.
He just like I said, he said it how it is, and sometimes it was like not inappropriate, but like harsh, you know, like a harsh reality. But like he always just knew how to spin it in a way to like inspire you to do better, kind of thing. And I think that's the mistake a lot of bosses, managers like beat down so hard on everyone below them and take absolutely no ownership of like what went wrong. When like at the end of the day, like they still signed off on it, kind of thing. So like yes, the buyer can make a lot of decisions on their own, but like ultimately it is a team effort. And I think a manager that can act like part of that team and not like they're above that team is important to find. And someone that like wants to invest the time in you, because like they don't have a lot of time as a manager. You're really like, it's hard. Like you're in so many useless meetings, but like they have to make the time for you, you know, and mentor you. Like even my boss, Lauren, who was my boss for 11 years, we had a lot of ups and downs, but she really did spend the time. And, you know, I was very lucky that she cared enough. And she was tough, really tough. But like, I think it made me better buyer, and you know, I did better a job because she pushed me. So yeah.
And what was the best hire you've ever made and why?
Probably, I can't even say, well, I guess I did hire Sarah, but this angel of a girl came, saw my store was opening. I wasn't gonna hire. I had like the Instagram handle. She DM'd me. She lived in the neighborhood, and she was like, I just want to stop. Like she had a full-time job. She's like, I just want something, you know, on the weekends that I have fun with doing and have a little extra money to spend. And she was just like this breath of fresh air. She's from Texas and like such a great like attitude, so amazing with customers. And so like even when I would give her, you know, not constructive criticism, like, you know, she wasn't restocking stuff. And I was like, Sarah, like that's a missed opportunity of a sale if you don't put the size small back out because no, someone might not ask for it. She just took it with like so much, like she was so thankful for the, you know, advice. And I actually helped her get her next job. You know, it's like sort of like it all like worked, pay it forward kind of thing.
Yeah.
She's now working for a jewelry brand that we hosted a bunch of pop-ups. I bought some stuff from them. So she's working there now, and she still comes in from time to time. But she was just like an all-around, just like great person, just like such a good energy.
Yeah.
So dependable, so honest, hard worker. Yeah, can't say enough good things about her.
Yeah, that's great. Did you have to travel much in any of your buying roles?
So Ross has two buying offices, one in LA, one in New York, but strangely enough, the New York buyers are supposed to only buy from the East Coast, vice versa, the West Coast buyers buy from the West Coast. But my biggest resource when I first was buying was on the West Coast. It was just like it had been set in stone for many years. So I would travel to LA 4 to 6 times a year, and then Vegas twice a year for that same magic and coterie. And then we started like traveling to Florida to visit stores. I know now they go to like Texas and North Carolina and all these places. Now I don't travel. I travel to the Javits Center. I go to Manhattan. There's just, I don't feel that there's like a need why I would spend money to go to a trade show in Atlanta versus Dallas. I could just do it here.
Right.
But traveling is important to like see what's going on in other parts of the country because a lot of us are so, it's LA, New York, and Miami, and that's it. But like the country is real big, and there's a lot of things, especially buying for Ross, that are going on in the middle of the country that have no bearing on what's going on here. And you get kind of sidetracked because you see like what all these influencers are wearing, and that's not what the girl in Kansas is wearing, you know, so you have to like understand how to buy for the masses when you're at.
Did you ever have to lean on your network to move your career forward? How did you go about it?
Like in terms of like my vendors and stuff?
Just like people in your network, you know, generally.
So my old DMM, my first DMM at Macy's, who I still speak to, her name's Stacey, she was an amazing mentor for me, and I was a trainee under her and then had been an assistant buyer. She actually went to Ross too, but she's not there anymore. When I wanted to
go from Macy's to Ross.
Yeah,
seems like a common thing.
When I was thinking about leaving Ross, I called her because I always like valued her opinion, and she was very much, even though she had a tricky experience there, she was like, do not leave. Like if you are on a good path there, like you should stay. Like she's like, there's a big future for you, you know, taking a chance. She actually told me to stay, but I kind of took it with a grain of salt, and I was like, you know what, I could always come back, like if all else fails kind of thing. And I was like, I gotta follow my gut here because there's something like itching inside me that's like saying like, this is what you need to go do. So, you know, it's interesting. It's like you have role models, you have mentors, and like, you should never just like stick to exactly what they say, because like you kind of know in your like DNA and your blood, like it's right or not. But it's very risky, you know, and it's, you have health insurance, you know, there's like all these things that you don't think about when you leave a job. I talked to her, the vendors and stuff, you know, I still keep in touch with some. I did speak to a couple vendors when I had left Ross to understand about opening a store, because like they had worked with some smaller towns. A lot of them, like I wasn't sure if I should work at a store first, even though I had in like high school and stuff, but they were like, you don't need to do that. Like that's going to be the easiest part of the job. It's like figuring out the inventory and stuff like that. Yeah, and finding the location. Yeah. That was actually the hardest part, was finding the location.
Yeah.
So definitely like some of the vendors, some of my old mentors, but a lot of talking to myself. I am my own best friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of self-talk. Yeah.
What advice would you give yourself then as a new graduate?
We're graduating right now.
Yeah.
I definitely think like making sure it's like you do this work that you do, you spend more time at work than you're going to spend with your friends or family. And it's not to say that every job is like so sparkly and shiny and fun, like, you know, because following your passion, I think at times is hard when you're young because you need experience. I think finding the place that's going to give you the best education to set you up for success is like the most important. Like, are people happy at this job? It might not be exactly what you think it's going to be. Like maybe you're going to go to a place that sells buttons. I don't know. But like, are people generally happy? Are people, you know, I know a lot of people don't stay at jobs as long as they used to, but I think it says a lot. Like when you see people that have been there for a long time and like understanding what the growth opportunities are somewhere. I think those are like the most important things. You want to do something that excites you and you're passionate about, but like, your first job's not going to be your last job. Yeah. So that might not be the perfect fit, but if it's a great training program, it's like, that might be worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the most important thing you learned on your first job?
You have to have a thick skin. Like, there were many times I wanted to cry. There were many times, which I know sounds ridiculous, like at a corporate company, but you also have to be like less emotional about it. I'm a Cancer, so I'm very sensitive, which I did not know until someone told me I was sensitive, and I got sensitive about that. So, but it's like, you don't want to be a robot and be emotionless, but you have to remember too, like, sometimes when people are getting pissed off at you, like it's not even about like what you did. It's like there's so many other things going on in their life, and you have to just remember like sometimes it's really just you, and I just everything that's so hard. But having a thick skin, asking questions, like you can question what's going on. I think that's really important. Don't just like go with the flow. You know, I think some of the like best assistants I've seen are the ones that challenged, like management, buyers, giving your opinion, like that matters. When you're in a showroom and a buyer turns to you and asks like for your opinion, you give it. Like you don't just like, I like what you like. That's like the worst thing you could do because it's like they want to hear your voice. Your voice matters. I think too, like I love asking interns. Like I would love asking interns what they thought. They've come from such a different lens of things, and you know they're at school. They would see what's going on. You know?
Yeah.
So I think asking questions, having a thick skin, giving your opinion. Don't be shy. You know, like it's really hard. Like when you first start, it is very hard not to be shy. But like you're there for a reason. They hired you for a reason. Remember that.
Mhm.
Be confident but not cocky, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And humble. Yeah.
Well, as a class, we developed 4 questions that we've asked all of our guests.
Mhm.
The first one, and that first question is, what was your favorite moment of your journey thus far?
Throughout all of it,
Throughout all of it, yeah.
I mean, definitely opening the store. I mean, without a doubt, for sure. Like that minute of like cutting the ribbon, like is just like a euphoria type feeling, and like seeing my daughter like look at me and like know like wow, like mommy did that. Like it's kind of like a wow moment. And yeah, it's hard too. Like you know, I have 2 little kids. And I'm not there a lot on the weekends, and it's really hard. But I say to her, like, I'm showing you like all the things that you can do with your life, like to show you if you put your mind to something, like I'm not saying like anything is possible, but there's a lot of possibility out there. And I think that's been like the most incredible experience.
What's a moment of failure and how did you recover from it?
There's like this funny story when I was gonna get promoted to be a buyer, I didn't know at the time. I was sent by myself to like, I don't even know where in Connecticut, to this like massive warehouse, this vendor. The vendor was called like NEJ, I remember. And they were basically, they owned the inventory that like sold to a bunch of different stores. They were almost like a third party. And I was going there to do this like big deal on behalf of the total junior division. Lauren was really pregnant. She was like 9 months pregnant. She couldn't go with me as an associate buyer. And Tony, it was my test. I didn't know. I just like thought they were sending me. And he's like, whatever you do not throw out a price. Like I'm telling you right now, they're going to pressure you. They're going to pressure you to give a price for the inventory. And I was buying like 100,000 units or something. And what do you know? I get to the place. He's like this, you know, working. It probably was with a few people, but the main guy was this like older guy, like had been doing this forever. And I was like, I'm early 20s. Like I was like very intimidated, you know, of the situation. And we're going through all the product and I'm like picking the things, whatever. I had Tony's voice in the back of my head, but I was like, a lot of times like I could do it, you know, like I don't need him and like I could do it myself. So I like threw out some price, like, and the whole deal like went to shit, I think, actually. And the guy got really pissed off that I like set this like really low price, and he was like very upset by it. And I called Tony, tell Tony, he like screamed at me. And Lauren was panicking, like all this stuff. And I was like, I am never gonna get promoted. Like this is the end of my journey. I should just pack up my stuff, go home, and like be done with it. And then like the next thing I know, I think it was like literally the next week, I got promoted. So it's just to show you, like, it ended up being fine. We like closed the deal. It wasn't a big deal, but he was trying to like prove a lesson. He wanted to make sure I would like listen to him, and I didn't. But like I guess he knew ultimately I would. Or maybe he wanted me to say the price. I don't even know. I guess that maybe that was the lesson. It was the test. But it's to say like every failure, there's going to be something that you get out of it, and I still believe that. You know, all the time I complain. I bought all the wrong stuff. Everyone hates my assortment. Even in the store now, when I have a bad day. And she's like, Jaclyn, I promise you, like, it will get better tomorrow. And then what do I know? I get back the next day, and then I have a great day. You know, so it's like,
Yeah.
And
My mom gave me the same advice, like, everything will feel better in the morning. And I tell this to my daughter at least once a week. And it's true. It's always better in the morning. what qualities do you look for when hiring, and any tips to make someone's resume stand out?
You know, I think what's really hard too when you're going into the workforce, they want experience, right? They're like, oh, we need experience. But I'm always like, how do you have experience if this is the first job? Like, you have to give the experience first. So, you know, I look a lot now, like when I was trying to hire someone for the store, it's more like, even if they worked at an ice cream store, just like having something that you could kind of maneuver into, like, you have customer service experience. Like, it doesn't have to be exactly that experience, but you have to show like a work ethic of some sort, you know, and whether that's through volunteering, whether that's through team sport, like there's some sort of experience you need to show. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that you interned for this big company or, you know, but I think you have to show that you are a go-getter, that you are hungry, you know what I mean? That you want a job, you know, and that you're gonna work really hard for it. Because nothing's gonna be handed to you on a silver platter. To no one, or it shouldn't be. And, you know, it's a lot of time. You gotta put the time in, and you gotta really, you have to really want it. And I think you have to like show that energy, like when you're interviewing, especially. And yeah, yeah.
What ways are you currently managing work-life balance?
A work in progress. You know, it's hard, I think, trying to not look at your phone when like I'm not at work, like checking emails and stuff like that. I think for me, it's a little easier because like I'm in a store, so when I'm there, I'm there. I can't think about home, and when I'm at home, I still think about the store, but I really try and focus my time and energy there. But like at Ross, I remember it was like physically putting my phone away so that I wouldn't check the email, because it's really hard not to, but you have to have the separation or you will absolutely burn out, and then you're not going to do well with your family, your friends, or work. So like you don't want to burn out. You want to work hard, but like during the work day, there's a reason why you leave work and then you should leave. Yeah. And you come the next day.
Yeah.
You should not be like answering emails and like working 24/7, because it's just, yeah. It's
exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And our last question is, how do you maintain passion for what you do?
That's easy, because it's like, I love what I do kind of thing. I think when you're working for someone else, it's hard to like love that you're doing something for someone else. But I think just, you know, seeing the fulfillment, whether it was at Ross and seeing the sales report and knowing like, wow, I did this, like I bought this and it sold, or like mentoring an assistant buyer and seeing them get promoted. Like those are the things that you're like, wow, like I can't believe like I helped this person. Even when Sarah got her new job, I was just like, I'm so happy that like she found this new company like through the store, like watching a young designer come in and like have a great pop-up experience.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let me turn it over to all of you.
I was just wondering if you have any like sustainable practices that you do in your business.
So I have a couple brands that are all like ethically, sustainably made. I don't have a specific practice. I think there are stores that are very focused on it, and I think it is a super important topic. I don't necessarily feel that I'm the most well versed in terms of sustainability in general, but it is something that, you know, I'm looking in the future to incorporate more. But I don't have like a specific practice, like a procedure, like guidelines or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay, so you shifted from like a corporate to entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
So in the role shift, what are some additional skills that you had to pick up, which are extremely important for entrepreneurship?
Mm-hmm. So just like when you're as a buyer, you were doing all these you were, you know, doing the bits, the samples, the buying, the negotiating. So when you become an entrepreneur, I always say I'm the janitor. I clean the floors, I clean the windows. I have to look at accounting. Um, I had to have negotiate a lease, um, hiring people, what does payroll look like? I have to have a internet bill, like all these other things I never thought about. Storage, fixtures. How did I had to figure out like what kind of fixtures, what kind of hangers, um, and like how I was gonna kind of keep track of what I was spending, which is so hard. Um, but I would say it's like you have to wear so many different hats as an entrepreneur. And then from the branding perspective, it's like I do all my social media, but like I have a girl coming in that's gonna help me do, you know, like reels and TikTok or whatever, all these different things. But you have to like also like lean on other people too and figure out that network. So Drew, who had been helping me, you know, throughout all of my strategy, you know, she's recommended different people. I had to have a photographer come when I first opened because you have to have like some sort of like professional pictures. There's so many signage, shopping bags, hang tags, you know, there's so many different things you have to think about. And I don't even have a big staff, but that would be like a humongous part of the job would be the human resources piece of it. Now I have I guess 3 in total, but 2 girls that
Okay.
So I finally found 2 girls. It's not perfect, but it's for now. It's working for now. Yeah, that was very hard to find part-time help.
Right,
It was not full-time.
right, right.
Yeah.
My first one was like going back to. Do you ever feel like you had to? Because I think that your style was very loud and fun and
Yeah.
colorful. So I just want to talk about how you was there a shift at all?
I definitely think I have like, you know, I definitely was still myself, but I think I would be more professional in terms of like how I was speaking to a manager or something like that, or talking to vendors. I think you have to know your audience, but I don't think I changed like authentically who I was. Because when that starts to happen, then you know it's not a good thing. Because if you can't, you know, obviously there's certain boundaries, like you can't push, you know, there were girls you could show wearing like a see-through thing, you know what I mean? Like there's certain things you have to be professional, but I definitely think you need to be authentically who you are. I think that's very important.
Speaking of, so we did. How did you advocate? How did you like practice or learn that okay, this is.
That's something I feel like too comes with time. I think watching how meetings would go and seeing how others sort of spoke and what worked and what didn't and sort of how it sounded. I think again, you need to be careful, you know, in terms of how you're saying things. I think there's always a way you can get your point across. But if like you're super aggressive about it or something, then the person's gonna feel attacked, you know? But I think if you have a good manager, that is like your first line of defense. Like you go to your manager first to talk it through. They should be your partner. And if it's something that, you know, you feel like you need to bubble up further, I think talking to them first and talking it through is very important. I think too, what I was also alluding to is like we'd be in these big team meetings, we'd have strategy meetings and stuff like that. And so many assistants and interns would have FaceTime with super high up level people. And I feel like people would be nervous to make to voice an opinion or a comment. And I think that's like your that's where they're asking you, like, participate, tell us your feedback. And at those points, I think sometimes people weren't taking advantage of that situation. And I always made it a point, like, if I was gonna be in a room with the CEO of Roth, I was gonna say something meaningful, not like silly, but if she was gonna ask a question, I would raise my hand. Because they remember those things. They do. Yeah.
That was very helpful. When you went from buying to buying superhero,
Mhm.
like talked about like really understanding the consumer. Are you basing like what you're buying off of the fashion forecasting from your customer you're developing, or like is it your own style or like a mix?
So you're saying now at the store, I think a lot of it is personally what I like, which is very different than buying for like a corporate company. And not always what I like is what everyone likes. But I went in and I said, I want this store to be anything but beige, because there's a lot of beige. So of course you have to have like layer in sort of more muted things in between the loud, but I buy things that I think would sell, but then I also put like my personal flair on it. Like today I was at a vendor, like I know my target customer is a lot of moms, a lot of people that are body conscious. So I was like looking at these dresses that were totally backless and were a bra, and I was like, I can't buy this. Like who's gonna wear this? You know, so I know certain things to look for, or if it's too cropped. You know what I mean? Like I look for certain things because I know what my like I know the customer well enough to see what are the questions, what is she gonna look at when she's going through the rack? Or is the sweater itchy? I was like, is there wool in this? Is there mohair? Because I got a lot of questions on fabrication for sweaters this winter, like fall. So certain things like that I look for. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
So I looked online at your store and I think it's really cute. I think it's really well curated. I'm just curious, like, what's the process of where do you like look to search for your merchandise, like not just clothes? And like how far ahead do you plan like each season?
So in terms of the non-apparel stuff, a lot of that is stuff that I buy very close to need. I don't generally buy that stuff far out because it sells really quick and the lead times are a lot quicker. Most of those companies, and I buy mainly through Fair, which is the wholesale website, which has been pretty incredible for me as a small business owner. I can communicate directly with the brands. They ship really quickly. They have what's called terms, so I don't have to pay for it upfront. I pay for it 60 days after I order it. So a lot of times I've already sold out the whole thing and then I pay the bill, which is so nice, versus apparel you pay for, sometimes you have to give a deposit, and a lot of times you just pay when they ship you. So from non-apparel, I don't really program stuff out. Obviously for the holidays, I bought like ornaments and stuff like that, but not far out. I bought it pretty close to need because I'm like conditioned to buy stuff closer to need because I don't want to sit with inventory and I don't want to pay for things that I can't sell for a while. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Stuff can be really tricky. I feel like when you're getting your stuff
For sure.
for everyone,
Yeah.
brands and shops. Good question.
What makes your store like
I think the most important thing is the customer experience. So beyond just the clothing, I never wanted anyone to feel like they were having like the pretty woman experience of walking into a store and not feeling like you were worthy of walking into the store. So I greet every single person with a hello, how are you? I never like am too pushy in terms of like, what are you looking for? I always just ask very open-endedly, let me know if you have any questions, and whether you spend $1, $0, or $1,000, you get the same treatment and the same goodbye. Because you never know if that person's ever going to come back. So I think customer experience is everything. I keep it fun, I keep it fresh, I change up the merchandise daily. So whenever someone comes in, there's always something new. most customers know not to even ask me what's new because they know like basically the whole store is. And that's hard because like you still don't sell everything 100%, but I will physically take stuff off the floor. I'll put it downstairs in my storage like closet thing, and I'll put new stuff out and then I'll put it back out, which doesn't always sell, but I try and change things up, especially if it's not selling. And then I think this, the pop-ups, the trunk shows, the different events that I run, I think differentiate the store in a way that not everyone's doing that in the neighborhood. And it's like super engaging. Like when Taylor dropped the new album, we had a listening party, we had Swiftie bracelet making at the store. So I did stuff for the little kids, even though I don't sell kids clothing, but I brought in like little kids Taylor Swift t-shirts. We have a lot of Swifties in our neighborhood. We still have t-shirts. Even during the holidays, you know, I do, once a month, I do what's called Dreamy Friday, and I offer free iced coffee, and I open up at 8 a.m. So like a working person can come in and shop before they head to work. Or, you know, if they're dropping their kids at school and they want to come after. So I do that also. And then some of the events run like after the store would normally be closed. We close at 6. Sometimes I run events from 6 to 9. I've done a lot of charity work too. That's been super, you know, fulfilling. Donating to schools and stuff like that.
So like right now it's one store, you're able to curate it really well
Mhm.
and pay attention to every detail. So in the future, when you think about scalability, how do you think you would approach it,
Meaning like, how would I buy differently or would I open more locations?
Both ways. Like, do you plan on opening more locations? If you do that, then how would you still keep the essence of the store? Because that, as you said, that's what your competitive factor is.
Yeah, I think that's like the secret sauce, right? Is figuring that out. I keep saying like every year I want to do something new. So this year was the website, last year was opening. I'm very intrigued by doing some sort of pop-up, like maybe in the North Fork out in Long Island. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I don't know that I would go ahead and sign another lease. I would love to see if I could like test the waters or like do a pop-up at a vineyard out there or something. Because I think litmus testing the market's really important. I mean, I did no testing before I opened this store, but a lot of people do. They start online first. It's not as common to go brick and mortar than online. But my expertise is brick and mortar, not e-com. So that's why I felt more comfortable doing that. So yes, I would definitely love to open up another location in Brooklyn, a location out Long Island. I'm from Long Island originally too, so that's why it kind of makes sense. And in terms of how I would keep it, the essence of the store, I think just making sure the product kind of stood for all those brand values, that it was sort of eclectic and different. There was a multitude of price points. Quality is super important. I don't know that buying differently, I probably would, depending on the location, if it made sense, you probably just buy a little bit more of like what you would have at one location, but it would be sort of interesting to carry a little bit different stuff so that people would feel a reason to go to the other store. But I don't know yet. I'll have to let you know when I open the next store. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Follow along. Any other questions?
How do you develop long-term strategies to drive growth and profitability? And how do you set budget for reordering?
So those are things that we like would look at daily at Ross, like very big level ideas and strategies and goals. It's different in my business now, but at Ross, at the beginning of each season, we would go in with a strategy and we didn't always stick to it, but it was kind of a guideline. And you need to do that because like you need to fully analyze what happened last season and know, okay, here's what I did, here's what did well, here's what didn't do well, which is actually just as important. And here were the things that were just like mediocre, And whether it's a trend, that's changing, a lot of it is how am I going to comp those sales, right? So let's say in the year, like even for me, I sold this one cardigan at the store. It was my best-selling cardigan, over 100 units for me, which is a big deal. I was like, I can't just keep carrying the same cardigan. Like, what am I going to do to make up for those sales? So the brands ended up coming out. They had like new buttons on the cardigan. They're coming out in stripes. Maybe they're going to do print, newer colors. But something that I didn't do well this year, I had a really good denim year last year, and my contemporary denim brand, I knew price point went up, styling was kind of basic, and I was like, how am I going to get more money for a more basic jean? And I ended up buying from them when I knew I kind of shouldn't, and selling a $200 pair of jeans, trying to comp that the next year is rough when you have to sell like 2 to 3 to 4 tops to make up for the one pair of denim. And I saw it in my sales for February and March. Like, it was really hard for me to get to where I was a year ago. So you always have to think of like, what was that driver last year and how you're going to replace it. Because you can't just you can't do the same thing over and over again. People get sick of it and trends change. So in a trend-driven business, that's the hardest part, is the replacement item. Profitability, it's like looking at who your best performing vendors were. I still do that. Like, how many, even the vendor that you might sell the most, if you take a lot of markdowns with them and your profitability isn't good, then that's not a good vendor for you. That was super important at Ross. Like, we would look at gross margin daily, weekly, monthly, because a lot of times it was the brand that you thought was like doing the worst for you was actually doing the best. And a lot of that was a function of markup. Markup is critical. So that's why it's very hard now with online. Like, you can research so many of these things, and I'm not saying to take advantage of the customer, but that's why you have to try and negotiate the best price up front on the cost. But I have no negotiation power. I buy 6 pieces, not 6,000. So that's been tough to figure out what the markup structure needs to look like to be profitable. Because I think a lot of small boutiques don't understand that. And then they take massive markdowns at the end of the season, and you like give away all the profitability. So I haven't at all mastered it, but I kind of have a formula of where I kind of need to be from a markup perspective. And it took me a little while to figure it out. I'm going to make up the number. I have to be at a 50% markup on all items, and anything I get above that is like, the cherry on top.
But markdowns that you're maybe gonna have to take.
Exactly. So, and the way I do that is I know certain brands that have a higher markup structure for me. So you have to sort of leverage that. Right now, I think I have probably too much high-end stuff that's at a lower markup, which is not good. But I know for second quarter, I didn't buy that much for second quarter because I knew I was going to have to buy like in season and to buy the higher markup stuff for second quarter. People get price sensitive, like especially in the month of June.
Somebody needs to pay for.
Yeah.
Somebody vacation.
Yeah, it's like something like, yeah.
What's the most important thing you think collaborating with design team?
We did a lot of that at Ross. Because because if you don't give your input from the get-go, they might design a line that like is not going to work for you. And if you need to buy all these units, then they can't sell to you, and then they, get frustrated. I think a lot of times designers don't always understand what's going to sell to the masses because they always want to be one step ahead. But it has to be wearable. There's a lot of trends that look terrible on the human body, and you have to understand there's so many different body types. So you have to have something that is gonna fit, that is comfortable, and that is that has the right trend components. But a lot of times we put so many trends in one garment, and that would never work. So I think working with the designers is important to explain that like equation to them. Yeah. I don't really work with designers as much now because unfortunately, like I generally just buy off of what I see. But I talk to my sales associate that's helping, like my rep. I tell them what's working and not working so they can guide me better.
Oh, question. are there any other tips for keeping connection with fashion industry people?
When you say fashion industry people, do you mean people I've worked with, or for you guys in terms of like how to approach like the fashion industry? For you guys. So I think, I think the job fairs are important, like showing up to those, getting your name out there, handing out your resume. LinkedIn for me worked. I don't know what it's like now, but I definitely think, I hired off Indeed for the store, and a lot of times it's hard to find the right fit there. But I do think these search engines, I know there's Handshake and stuff like that. You have to be proactive on it and apply for the jobs. And it doesn't need to be like so wordy. I think people get very caught up in what am I going to say in this email to someone? I think if you just send something like authentic to you and it seems like you want to learn and you're open to things, but I think that can go a long way. But I know sometimes like you email companies and you get no answer, right? Because it's like it goes into the abyss of whatever. That's why I think you got to utilize your network here. Like who else can FIT connect me with? Because I know FIT has a ton of relationships with companies. Use that to your advantage. Yeah, that would be my best advice.
What are the main source inspirations from your brand? Or
What's the main source of inspiration?
I guess it started with color because I did paint the store pink, and I think it brings kind of like happiness to people. I think the other thing was to carry, to make sure there's not going to be something for everyone, but I wanted everyone to feel like they could come in and find something they might like, whether it was a card, a pair of socks, a shirt. So just having a lot of different price points, I think, is important, and not just being super high end or super low end. I have like a mix of both. People are always like pleasantly surprised when they come in to find something new, and I think that's important too.
Thank you so much for your
Yeah.
time and all of these great, thoughtful answers.
Well, thank you guys are such an amazing audience. Thank you for all the questions, and I hope I was helpful.
Call yourselves Carol Gardens, I guess.
I think
Kind of on the border of
It's the
Kiwanis,
border.
Gardens, Colorado.
Carroll Gardens, Cobble Hill, but seriously,
Miss-
follow me on Instagram. You could DM me, you could email me. I'm very I want to help people like in your shoes because I know what it's like trying to find your first job. It's hard, but like persevere. It will happen. Timing is everything. Just be patient. But yeah, here's a resource if you need it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you next
Thanks for
week.
having me.